All right, everybody. It is time for a little book of the month. All right. So, as you saw by the splash page there, we're going to work on Personality Plus, and this is the second week in the series, actually. So, we're going to delve into a book that's been pretty instrumental in one of the cornerstones of what I think is important about leadership training and being the kind of leader that people respect, being the kind of leader that gets results long term, and also just living a more fulfilled, happy life. And it sounds like, like, what are you talking about? That's crazy. All that stuff. Yeah, that actually has affected a ton of stuff for me. And I think it's definitely going to stay in my training that I do for leadership, for people, for companies, for students, for whatever. I think it's very difficult to get around, seriously get around without discussing personalities and how to get along with people and where they're coming from and understanding people a little bit more than just, oh, they're bossy, or like characterizing them with one or two adjectives, right? So boxing people in, although that's looks like what we're doing, and actually Florence, who the author, kind of addresses that in a couple of the chapters here, that we're not trying to box people in. We're actually just trying to understand what motivates them, right? What works for them? What is their style? And can we understand when we understand that, it's a lot easier for us to be to be a lot more empathetic, to understand how to approach them, so they're going to be more receptive to our ideas and maybe want to do what we ask them to do, as opposed to making them do what we ask them to do. Making people do things, which is extremely difficult long term, especially with goodwill, right? Is certainly very difficult without this kind of thinking, with this kind of understanding. All right, it's enough of why I think it's important. So welcome. This is the E3 Leadership Training and Coaching Book of the Month series, and we are, again, second week into Personality Plus by Florence Littauer. And so we're going to look at it's part two. Part two, Personality Potential is what she calls it. And there's 5 chapters, 3 through 7, that we'll discuss. And mainly what she's doing with these chapters is discussing what those personality styles, and there are 4 main ones that she identifies. I'm going to use her terminology tonight. She talks about the popular sanguine, the peaceful phlegmatic, the powerful choleric, and the peaceful phlegmatic, right? So I want to make sure I got the choleric one right. Yes, powerful cleric. Okay, good. So I'm laughing because I am one. So just that it's funny that I would doubt what that word was. Anyway, she throws in, there's 4 there, and there's 5 chapters in here. And what's interesting is in the middle of these 4 explanations of each style, she throws in this idea that actually I had forgotten about. And I'm so glad I rewrote this book. Man, it's such a good idea to reread books, right? The more you delve into this whole understanding people and understanding yourself and what really motivates you to be you, so to speak, the more you're receptive to new ideas, to deeper ideas, to outside the box thinking, as a cliche. And so rereading this book, man, there were a couple things that I literally had completely forgotten about. Great. I'm so happy that I did. So happy. It's really helped me clarify some things that I'm putting together, kind of my new twist on personality styles, and I'm very excited about it. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm just developing new materials. I'm doing some things about it that are me, very much grounded in what Florence put together, kind of what she laid out. I think, again, what she did, great work, and there's a lot of stability and validity to what she did. So there's no reason to kind of try to change it or alter it. And there's some great programs out there that are very similar. They've expanded on the idea and kind of branded their own deal. great too. Anyway, so lots of people do this, and it's really good to see that it stood the test of time from me, because it's been a very long time since I first read this book, and really glommed on to these principles, and they've very much been a big boon. Okay, so let's get into it. So before she gets into the chapter, she just kind of lays out the strengths of each one, right? So one of her big things is like, look, personalities are personalities. We all have our strengths and we all have our weaknesses, and certain personalities tend to have certain strengths and tend to have certain weaknesses depending on how your certain makeup of that personality fits, right? So so I'll just take that as what it is. So she talks about the popular sanguine personality, and I'm just going to give you the headers, right? I'm not going to go into the whole, read you the book or anything. The idea is to read the book, right? So she says the extrovert, the talker, the optimist. And so that's kind of the headline. And then she gets here are the strengths, emotions, as a parent, at work, and as a friend. So, in a nutshell, they're fun to be around. They love to tell good stories. They create fun as a parent. They are interested in relationships in the sense of, let's all work together. Let's create a great environment. So really great for that kind of position at work. Can motivate people just because of their charming personality. They're very outgoing. Again, the extrovert, that kind of thing. All right. Then you have the perfect melancholy, sorry. The introvert, the thinker, the pessimist, right? So in a way, the way she sets that up is like it's one page and then the one next to it. It's almost like they're opposites, which in a lot of ways they are. And I'll bring up that something I was going to say now later. All right, so the introvert, the thinker, the pessimist, their strengths as far as emotions, as a parent, at work, and as a friend. So the thing that's really great about them is they're very deep. Like they like to think about deep concepts. They like to analyze things. They like to understand why things happen and make the best move, right? Analyze all the data, and then make sure that they're not making the wrong move, right? So which is great, because then they've really thought things through. They're not just flying off the handle. They're very controlled. They even keel, right? They develop not a lot of friends, but very deep friendships with a few people. They like organization, many taken to extreme, that all about numbers, all about charts. Let's figure out all the details. Let's see. As far as as a parent, okay. So sets high standards, right? So make sure that people follow the rules. They teach them, what are the rules of the road, and let's make sure we're doing the right thing here. And they're very consistent about that, which is great. And then as a friend, they're really good at seeing solutions to problems, right? Because they do analyze things so much. They can see patterns where other people don't. They can see solutions. They can remember bits of information that are very helpful in situations, right? So very good as far as that goes. Okay, then you got the powerful choleric. Headline, the extrovert, the doer, the optimist. That's interesting, right? Because the popular sanguine, the extrovert, the talker, the optimist. So they're very similar as far as she's concerned, is like the overriding kind of headline of their personality traits, or tend to be traits, very similar, right? The only difference is one's more in the talking, one's more in the doing. So their emotions, their parent, work, print. So what she really goes into, and I'll go, it goes in here in one of the chapters, but she calls them born leaders. Now, that's a little misleading for me. I think in the I don't know, the cursory view of what a leader is, they tend to have the traits of taking charge, getting things done, sticking to things. So in that sense, they're kind of born to be a leader in that way. The thing that's misleading about saying it like that is that it infers that others aren't born leaders, so they're not as good. Now, she would be quick to say that's not the case. It's just the way it's framed. I tend to avoid saying it like that because all 4 personalities can be extremely great leaders. I know some amazing ones of all 4 types, right? In business and in nonprofit and in the education world, I've known all 4 personality styles that were extremely good at what they do. So being a leader doesn't mean take charge all the time. It can mean that, and it's good to be that way sometimes. We'll get into that another day. But the thing about, the powerful cleric is people think they're just naturally a leader, and so they'll take over, and they do. And they tend to, like, they like it that way, right? So they like to, let's see, they like to establish goals for themselves. They also, like, as a parent, they establish goals for the family. That can be very motivating, right? And it can be very helpful to keep the family on track with, staying as a unit and moving in the same direction. Again, very goal-oriented. They sometimes even thrive on opposition, right? When somebody says, you can't do that, a choleric will, in their head at least, if not outwardly, say, oh yeah, watch me, right? So sometimes it depends on, their specific makeup, but sometimes if you want to motivate a choleric person, it's tell them they can't do it, right? And that, for other personality styles, that doesn't work. And there's reasons for that, and the chapters go into that, but this is when you can. The thing that's, as far as cholerics go, and she says this a lot, is they tend to be right, and they have very good hunches. They just kind of can see bigger picture and know, yep, that's the right move, even without all of the data. They just know. It can be very annoying to some people, but it does happen. Right? And it does seem to happen often. Okay, now the 4th one is the peaceful phlegmatic, the introvert, the watcher, the pessimist. Again, the perfect melancholy, the introvert, the thinker, the pessimist, and the phlegmatic, the introvert, the watcher, the pessimist. So she's painting these as very similar for the most part, right? But she's also, in the order that she's presenting them, is that they're kind of opposites, right? So you got the extrovert and the introvert, and the extrovert and the introvert. Let's look at it very simply that way. So interesting, right? So just her delivery is well thought out. This isn't random, and she says she's a popular sanguine. So sanguines aren't known necessarily. Strong suit isn't organization. So that it is that way is a testament to her and her team that put this together, for sure. Okay, so the phlegmatics, right? They're kind of an all-purpose person. They sort of fit in where they need to. They don't want to make waves, but they're very low key, so they're easy to get along with. They don't rock the boat, right? They don't cause conflict ever. In fact, they kind of avoid it. They're very agreeable. She says, as far as work, they have administrative ability, which I think, in that sense of seeing this from other people's point of view and trying to make sure that everyone is taken care of. That's a trait of theirs for sure. They're a very good listener, right? They tend to have a dry sense of humor, but lots of compassion and concern for others, for sure. So, and she says, look, she's got her first book is actually the Personality Puzzle. So this is another book in the series, but the Personality Puzzle really delves in even further into all this. So she's doing sort of the cursory. Here's what they are. Now, each chapter, except for one coming up here, she gets into each one and talks at length. So I'm not going to necessarily deep dive all 4 and talk at length about all of it, but I do want to highlight a few things that are interesting about what she did about presenting these. So in each chapter, she starts each chapter about how the world needs this type of person. And so it's like a little poem, if you prose poem kind of deal, that this personality is very good for certain things and all four of them have a place in the world, and they're all very important for this world to actually work well. And I think I'm going to somewhat extrapolate. I think she would say that, and she's a Christian, so a lot of this is based in Christian beliefs and actually things that she quotes from the Bible in the book. So you don't have to believe in God if that's a thing that you're concerned about. This isn't about like proselytizing or whatever. That's just her vantage point. That's where she gets a lot of her insights into what's going on in the world is what is taught there. Okay, well, take it for what it's worth. I happen to agree with her, but that doesn't mean that excludes everything that's outside of that. It's just it's a good place to start for looking for wisdom about people. There's a lot of wisdom in the Bible, and you don't even have to believe, but if you read what's there, you can see the truths about people talked about in there. So a lot of this comes from there, actually. Anyway, all right. So then she talks about, so this kind of happens for each personality style, is how are they as kids? So it's popular sanguines, and it's even, okay, so I'm going to show you this. So there's a little picture each time too of a baby in a crib with a certain sort of stance and look on their face, and where they are in the crib and what they're doing and how they look is a caricature of their personality styles as a baby, which I think is really good. It's really good to know that you can, and I have kids that are grown now, but I would watch them as babies. I would watch them as toddlers and really observe, like, what is their person. I was very curious what it would be, and I wasn't trying to make them anything. I just want to know how they were made up, and then I wanted to relate to them as best I could that way. So we'll leave it at that, right? I did. It was fun. It was fun to watch. So the sanguine children, right? They're the ones that are always paying attention to people. They tend to play with a lot of toys, one very quickly, and then they move on to something else. They certainly want to interact with people. They want to be around people, and they have they tend to be very smiley and giggly and that sort of thing. So as they grow, that sort of leads into them being talkative, right? The quote, the extrovert. They like to talk to people. Sometimes it can be taken to extreme. And she gets in this in each chapter too. That can always be, any strength can be taken too far and become a weakness or a detriment, right? So if you talk so much all the time, you don't let anybody else talk, right? So you kind of, you're just being overbearing by just talking all the time. So that can actually wear on people. Like, oh boy, are they ever going to be quiet, right? Is he ever going to shut up? Okay, well, then you got to be careful, right? So every style has a point at which it becomes a detriment, right? It's a strength, but you got to be careful, right? And so that one is one of them talking too much, right? Just taking over a conversation without really even knowing what's going on. Also, she talks about how they tend to, when, they're just, people are audience. They're not individuals. They're an audience, and it's time for them to share. It's time for them to tell this great story they thought of or remembered or happened. Sometimes embellished, most of the time embellished, actually. If they're extreme sanguines, then they're going to embellish all the time, because it's way more fun when it's got drama in it than just facts. Facts are kind of boring, so let's colorize it, right? Let's put some color into it, make it interesting. Man, then they'll love it, right? So that's kind of their other headers: life of the party, memory for color, right? So instead of details about what street name, like, oh, is by that, I turned right at the blue gas station. You'll hear sanguines talk about color a lot, and they'll descriptor words rather than factual words. They'll talk about descriptor words, how they felt, or what color someone was wearing, what type of clothes they were wearing, what their accessories might have been, or how they seem to feel at the time, right? So very emotionally driven. And with that though, again, strength, right? So if you think about that kind of person, great on stage. They love to be the center of attention. That's their element. So yeah, put me on stage, I'll talk, and this will be awesome, right? They tend to be very expressive, right? Okay, so they're very curious about things in the sense of they just want to know stuff. Like the word gossip comes a lot when people talk about this sometimes. I don't know if it is sometimes that people, saying was tend to like to gossip or hear gossip more than say a couple other personality styles. But it's not so much that they want to be mean about it. They just like hearing things about people, right? So it's just things about people that are very interesting to them. She makes a point of saying they're kind of always like children, right? They have this childlike air about them and they kind of see the light world through a child's eyes more so than others. Charms others, makes friends easily, seems exciting. And it's interesting, she says seems exciting, right? So they will, again, colorful language, dramatize things. So what they do, they'll probably post things always. They're just like, oh, this was the best ever. This was the best ever. This was the best ever, constantly, right? Which can wear on other people. So again, taken to extreme can be rough. So there you go. That's kind of that one. The Perfect Melancholy is next. And again, little prose poem about how they're needed in the world. So it's very easy to think of people that are more thoughtful and quiet and reserved, to think that they're not engaged, don't care, don't want to be there, don't want to participate, don't want to talk, don't want to, just want to go away, right? And that may or may not be true. It's just you have to be very careful not to assume that with people, especially with the perfect melancholies, right? So melancholies like to analyze. They like to think through things. They don't want to just say the first thing that comes out of their mouth, or first thing that comes in their mind, it comes out of their mouth. They want to think it through. They don't want to look stupid. They don't want to appear to be shallow, right? So they think through everything, right? And that's a good idea, right? So they don't like to put the foot in their mouth, so they don't say stuff that does that. They tend to be more serious. They're tend to be a little more on the intellectual side. She talks about being genius. Again, genius, maybe from an academic standpoint, I think applies here. I think all personalities can be genius. Depends on what area you're talking about. Emotional intelligence, actual, analytical intelligence, street intelligence. There's different ways to be a genius, right? So I'll leave that for what she says. Gets back to, they really dig the details, charts, graphs, whatever, and also having things orderly, things in their place. Things need to be in a certain place. Otherwise, it's very difficult for them to focus. So they have to have things in a certain place. Taken to extreme, that's like OCD, right? So this can easily become a weakness if they cannot function without things being in place. So, a show like Monk, if you've ever seen that show, is kind of like that. They tend to have very high standards, which can be great in certain cases, but it also can be debilitating, right? So they set such high standards that they don't get anything done, right? You can't do it until XYZ. Well, XYZ is not going to happen for 50 years. So I guess we're not doing it or whatever, right? They tend to seek ideal situations, especially like in a mate. They want the ideal mate. So they figure out what the ideal mate is and they got their sights set on that, and that's how it's going to be, which is, again, not bad. Taken to the extreme, I don't know. That's a good question to talk about someday. Okay, now this next little part is what was interesting. This is something I'd forgotten about. So she throws this little chapter in here, talks about emotions. And she's actually just kind of taking those first two personality styles, the popular sanguine and the perfect melancholy. And she says, and this is what I'd forgotten, they both have very high highs and very low lows. The sanguine moves very quickly from one to the other, and it's very, just like boom, 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 bouncing around like a pinball machine, right? Just wow. And they don't stay anywhere very long, but they're up and down a lot. So it's very dramatic, right? Very dramatic, very high and very low, and tears and then happiness like within seconds, right? So can be great. And then in a similar, this is the thing, this is how they're similar, is that the phlegmatics, or the melancholy, sorry, has the same thing. It's just that their period of highs are much longer and their period of lows are much longer. So they don't shift as much. They stay in one longer, but they make those dramatic shifts. And because of the way that they're kind of built, the tendency is to be down more, right? To be more realistic and more pessimistic about things. So they tend to get depressed more. They tend to think about things as what's going to happen that's bad, what could happen that's bad, what's going to happen that's bad, right? They tend to stay there more. But when things are moving the way they should, right, when their plans are working out, then it's a high for a while. Then they can ride that for a while. So there's this similarity in that they both go up and down. It's just that sanguine's like bounce around, and the melancholy is more stable, if you will, but they have those eyes in those two. That was something I had forgotten. I mentioned that earlier. I'd forgotten that about that similarity about them, which is great, right? That's something that I know I'm going to be incorporating in what I talk about. All right, then on to the other two. So we got Let's Get Moving with the Powerful Cleric. Again, the prose poem at the beginning about how the world needs clerics. Again, she throws out this born leader thing. I'll let it sit, whatever. The other thing she puts in here is the compulsive need for change. And I can certainly attest to that change for a choleric is kind of a necessity. And that doesn't mean that everything has to change, but there has to be change. Most of the time, from my experience, for me and for others, change has to be perceived as a positive thing, meaning we're making a change to make things better. It doesn't just change for change's sake. It's change to progress, to reach the goal, to become something better so that those things can happen, right? That's more what the change is about. It doesn't have to be, I got to have a new car every 2 days, otherwise I'm going to go crazy. That's a little different, right? And that might be a version of it, but it's more about things and the way things work around them need to, or it's okay to change. They're okay with it because it's a goalpost of motion, forward motion. They tend to, think they can run pretty much anything. They know they can run in like, okay, what do we got to get done? And then they line her up and delegate and let's go, right? They thrive on opposition, like I mentioned earlier. She says they have little needs for friends. And I guess I get where she's coming from. I think it's kind of the extreme version is what she's talking about, which is true for all these chapters, as she's talking kind of the extreme cases. Is that, yeah, friends, sure, great, but I got things to do, right? I got these things going on. We'll get together when I'm done, and that'll be great. They don't need to hang out with friends to feel okay, right? They're okay with just working, with just going after the next thing for themselves or for their friends. They excel in emergencies is kind of her last point, is they keep a cool head. They understand how things are going to work out. So they just work, right? They go. And so in an emergency, when you need a quick decision, right, to be made, they're good at that. They're just like, nope, this is what we need to do. Right or wrong, they'll make a decision and move forward. And usually it's right in their heads, for sure. It's right. But they do have good instincts. They tend to have instincts about how things are going to work because they see how things work well in the bigger sense. So they do have good instincts on what's going to make the best move. So not always, but they tend to. That's what she says. All right. And then last one is Let's Relax with the Peaceful Phlegmatic poem. And her next, kind of big statement is they're all purpose, right? They like to just fit in. They're okay with being a little malleable, if you will, with the situation. They're okay with, just as long as it doesn't create conflict, they're cool, whatever, let's go with the flow, right? It's kind of and very low-key personality. Again, very go with the flow, they're easygoing, they're collected, they're well balanced, they're very patient, right? Which is great in friendships. That's great in workplaces. They're just very patient about lots of things. To a fault, they're so patient. It's okay if it doesn't get done. It's like, well, it's okay. We'll work it out later. No big deal. When there's a deadline, that isn't necessarily the best attitude about it, right? So again, taking to extremes, it can cause issues. But generally speaking, yeah, you want somebody that's calm, not freaking out every 10 seconds about what went wrong. Like, no, we'll handle it. It'll be fine, right? Another one she puts in here is mediates problems and has many friends. That's another point I wanted to make. I tended to think of them as like they're more reserved, they pull away. No, and I was wrong. I attributed that to them for too long. I think that's true for some, but it's only because they don't want to appear to be pushy. So they don't necessarily reach out very comfortably to others, but they're very easy to talk to. So they have a lot of friends that love to talk to them, share their problems, and just have somebody listen, be a sounding board, that kind of thing. So they tend to have a lot of friends, and they give, right? They tend to give a lot because they're such a good listener, and etc. All right, so that is part 2 of the book, chapters 3 through 7. It's really just a rundown of each personality, mostly about their strengths, right? A little bit of stuff about not their strengths, which is the next part, actually, is when things can go a little awry. So we'll talk about that next week. And if you have any questions about the book, about me, about E3LC, and what we can do to help with training leaderships in your business or for you, or as coaching, right, which is a separate thing, related in some ways, but I also do coaching on a personal level, in transition, about business, people that want to start a business, people that have a business, or just life, right? I also do some consulting in the online business realm and also in health. So there's lots of things that I'm setting myself up as somebody who really wants to be able to help people move forward in whatever area they want and have some answers in the consulting side, and have some tools to help people figure out their own answers on the coaching side. There's a big delineation there that'll help if you're not sure about the difference. So that's one way to think about them. All right, so comment on the video if you want. Get a hold of me at e3lc.net. Check out that, and then you can email me from there. So thanks a lot for hanging out with this book of the month, and we'll see you next time. Take care.